Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil YouTube video. Today we've got our battle tent, season 1, episode 5. If you haven't seen the most recent episode, I'll bring you up to speed. I got back from vacation. I left for 2 weeks. It was probably about 2.5 weeks total time away from the plants. And they were to here. They overgrew so quickly. And so to explain how that happened, because it can happen for you if you've got a really good setup, good soil, your environment's dialed, things can go really quickly. But they come in stages. And when I was transplanting, I may have mentioned it, but the clones that I transplanted, they were left in the back room with the lights off for a weekend, and so they went into flower. They didn't start growing flowers, they just were triggered hormonally, and I could tell. And so when I transplanted, I knew they'd have to grow out of that. And I think on the video before I left town, episode 3, you can see that I'm pointing to where it's growing back to single leaf, which is the end of re-veg, and then it starts to grow out of it into 4 or 5 leaf sets on a clone. And so I thought, all right, I can't flip to flower right now. I'm leaving town, and this thing is not through its hormonal change. It's still trying to come back through its re-veg. And so hopefully that'll buy me a little time. Well, I got back and the earth boxes, you know, the Grandmaster and the Cypress and all the stuff that we've done here, it's just too good and things grew too fast. And so you can see that in that most recent episode. And then I was left with the dilemma. Do I start cutting all the tops off, or do I try and strap it down with a 4x4 tent? And because it was so overgrown, and because I've got to record it, you know, a lot of times you'll make decisions on the go in your grow room, and I kind of had to stick with it. When the camera turns on, I just go, and I realized at the end of that episode, I was talking to Dave, and I'm like, man, that's too much plant material strapped back. It looks terrible, it's not gonna work. It limits the airflow, and also the GMO is just gonna stretch through all of that. It was gonna be overgrown in a couple days. So I went back in, I recorded it, and I started cutting tops off, cutting branches off, stuffing it under the trellis, and I gotta tell you, it sucks to have to do all that, especially when you're brand new. So when you're brand new, flip to flower very early and you'll have a very easy to manage grow. However, we stick with it here. And so since this has happened, I just want to write it out, show you what it looks like. We've already kind of overgrown the earth box, so I went with a heavy top dress in the last video at the same time as I strapped it all down because I have no time. We've got to get to flower. I was gonna flip to flower right away, but after you do a big defoliation, you cut branches off and you stuff it under the screen, it can stress them out a bit. So I wanted them to start drinking water and start growing again before I flip to flower. That way we're basically ready to launch. And so if you want to follow along with me, I'm about to show you in the tents, but I've got the environmental guide. It's the protocol from BuildASoil.com. You can go up to the educational, go into the environmental protocol, environmental guide, and you can get this and print it out or just read it on your screen, on your phone, whatever. And so in the bloom stage, there's certain prerequisites for the environment that I have to set and get ready, including switching from whatever light cycle you're on to 12 hours of light. That's how you begin flowering with photoperiod plants like we're doing. Normally we stagger that. We start at like 20 hours, then we go to 18, then to 16, and eventually to 12. However, you can just hard flip. The weakest link is the space in the tent. And so we don't have time to stagger. Had I been here the whole 2 weeks, I would have staggered it, but since I was gone, and they overgrew, my weakest link is the space. I'm gonna go from 18 hours right now, right to 12 hours. And the first day of flower is gonna be tomorrow because the lights have to go off. They have to have that 12 hours of night for the first time. And then they're gonna come back on for its first 12-hour day. That'll be day 1 of flower. And so I'm gonna show you on camera. I'm gonna take my phone, I've got it in my pocket, and I'm gonna go through the AC Infinity app here and I'm gonna adjust it for flower. Otherwise, I wanna show you in the tent. And not as an example of what to do, but as an example, if you blow it and your plants get too big, how to prepare for flower. So it's just me today. I've got the camera on a tripod, so I'm gonna take it off right now and I'm gonna show you over here, show you on the other side. This side, I've already done some tucking on. The other one, I let go. I just did it. That way I can show you how I'm gonna match it on this side. Once I'm done doing all the tucking and kind of showing you what that takes, then I'm going to discuss the environment on here and set it, and that'll be the wrap up of the episode. And then as soon as that's done, the first couple days of flower, I'm gonna put another layer of trellis net up, and I'm gonna talk about the feeding schedule and what you might do if this is your first grow so that you know exactly what to do and when so you get really good results. The nice thing is with an earth box and a top dress, you can pretty much just go water only the whole way, especially if you flip to flower on time. So learning lesson today, and I can't wait to show you. So let me set this down. I'm going to open up the tent that we have done. And that kind of blasts the light into the camera, so you might not be able to see. So let me grab it, and let's see if I can't keep it this way and show you. So look at the color changes when you get closer. You can see how pretty it is. Let me flip this and see if I can't do that like that. All right, so there's the light. This is the cypress side. And you can see what they look like underneath. So I still need to do a little bit of defoliating under there. You can see that some of the leaves that I kind of stripped that I didn't reach back and grab, there's a couple dead ones there I've got to grab. Other than that, it looks really pretty good in here. Let's go underneath the top dress and see what it looks like. And so you can see all the worm castings and everything starting to break down. No real feeder roots yet. Let me see on the sides. Some feeder roots just starting, but I think we've got plenty of top dress in here to go the whole way through flower, even though we overdid it. These earth boxes have that extra bit of horsepower because you can top dress them because they get clean water on the bottom the whole time. Normally, if you overdo the amendments, there's no way for the plant to get straight clean water. They're forced to deal with it. But the earth box sub-irrigated is kind of a hack. Love those new moon covers. A lot of people asked about them. In fact, we sold out. We just got our shipment tracking today, so those are coming back in stock. This is what I'm attempting to achieve. Let me show you the other side right now. Okay, this is the Grand Master side. Look at that light, it's beautiful. It looks red, white, and blue. Anyways, you can see this one is popped through, and that's what the other side looked like. And so if I go all the way back, you can kind of tell that the right side is a little bit flatter, and that's because I just tucked it. But essentially, see how these are just too tall? I need to just get this under the screen again. So let me get this on the tripod. We'll see what I can do here. I think you can kind of see what's going on here. This is kind of fun filming by myself. All right. So you're just gonna have to figure this out. I can't show you an exact method here, but essentially all these tall branches need to go under somehow. And normally, if it's over on this side and it's too tall, I'll push it to this side, right? That way you get some way to crisscross them all and keep them down without just pinching and breaking them all. So let me move that back just a bit so I have some room. And I'm just gonna get in here and start doing it and show you what it looks like when I'm done. So here's the net. I'm just gonna start tucking. I'm gonna grab the camera back so you can kind of see the height now. Okay, there we go. So now, you see how it's a lot flatter all the way across? I'll be managing this every day because we overgrew it. I'm gonna go in there, I see one more leaf in the back I need to go pluck. Take a look here and see. Looks pretty good. So I don't think I did this on the last episode. I mentioned it, but I did water in with the Biofos and with the WDG 3000 to make sure there's no gnat larvae at all in the new top dress. And so things are looking pretty good in there. Now it's time to flip to flower, and I'm really pushing it because typically I wanna be below 50% when I flip to flower. Ideally for you, I want your plant to be significantly smaller, not filling the whole canopy when you first start. You can begin to scrog the whole thing out later, but it's a little bit harder. So ideally, flip to flower a little sooner, but we're still gonna send it and I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna have to immediately come put another layer of trellis so I can start crisscrossing it again. Otherwise, the buds are gonna go right into the light. But we'll also get to see if there's any differences in flower structure or anything under these two grow lights. Otherwise, so far, they're both working very, very good. Very, very well, I should say. All right, well, it's a mess, but it's working. I'm gonna put the tripod back on. We're gonna talk about flipping to flower. Cool, I think it's gonna be better if I zip up these tents so you can see me. All right, now, I'm going to go to the AC Infinity app. All right, and so I've got it on veg right now. And so I'm just gonna kind of talk about it. We have another video showing you how to set up your AC Infinity controller. And you're gonna have to go through and learn a little bit about this, but I think me just talking about it might help you, especially if you're looking at the app while I talk about it. So I've got vegetative, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go here to this plus. And there's a lot of reflection there, but I'm going to add an entirely new recipe for flowering. and it's gonna turn off the veg, and that's fine. The automation is off. Everything's still on over here, okay? Says flowering's on, but until I fully set it up, I think it's gonna be like that. That's just kind of how the AC Infinity works. So we'll see. Either way, I'm gonna be flipping it to the flower one as soon as I'm done setting it up. In fact, let me just go back and turn off flower, turn on veg. And now I know for sure all my automation's running. I just heard the fan kick off, so that's a good sign. Now, I'm gonna set up flowering and then I'm gonna turn it on, okay? So the first thing that I do is I look at what the flowering already has, and I don't need all of that, but the first one is the fan. I'm gonna go to the light instead of the fan. So the first thing I wanna do is set up the mode. The way that I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna go to my automation schedule, and instead of continuous 24 hours, 7 days, I'm going to uncheck that and I'm gonna go to start at end at. Now what I encourage you to do here is we are indoors, we're in our business in a warehouse. And so we've got, you know, it's normally heated in here, especially during the day. And it's got a minimum, I think we've got it set to 68 degrees in here in this shop. And so we've got it pretty good. Big, huge lung room, they call it, meaning all the air around these grow tents. It's too big for me to humidify or anything, so I can't really treat it like a lung room, but at least it's warm in here. Some people's garages are really cold, and so they have to add a heater right inside the grow tent, and AC Infinity makes one. Otherwise, it's kind of better to heat the garage. That way you're not focusing on heating the tent, as that can cause some condensation and some effects to the VPD. But with our new equipment, it's pretty easy, and so I'm not trying to go off on too much tangent. I'm just trying to switch to flower. So here's what you need to think about. Here, I'm running lights on during the day, because that's when I'm here. Normally, when I have a grow, it's at home, and so my home grow, the lights turn on at night. And so the morning for the plants is my evening. When I get off work and go home, the lights turn on and I can check on the plants. And this does a couple of things. One, it enables me to check on the plants after work. But the other thing is, it's hot in the summer. And so you don't want to run your grow lights that add 10 to 15 degrees in your warm house in the middle of summer, or it's more challenging in the day. Where at night, it's cool in Colorado. So I always get a little bit of a benefit there where it's easier to manage. So I run my grow lights at night when I'm in flower, because that's the 12-hour section, right? And then I have to think, okay, do I want them to come on at like 5 p.m. so that they're for sure on when I get home from work at some point? Or do I want them to start a little bit later? That way, if I ever need to, I can check them in the morning. I don't like to water right before the lights go off for plants, so I prioritize being able to get in there and see the plants in the evening. Now, if you're in a garage, you may want to maximize your lights on time during winter to be when it's coldest. So you might want to start later at night. That way, the coldest part of the morning, your lights are still on, and then they shut off a little later. So that's just the weakest link. Think about temperature. Think about how you're cycling your lights. The other thing is, if you're in an area where electricity is a little more expensive, sometimes there's off-peak hours where less people are using electricity. They don't charge you as much for off-peak use. You can set up your grow lights to be on during that time and save some money. However, with the new LEDs, it's like 30, 40 bucks a month to run a light, or two, I forget, I'd have to do the math, but depending on your kilowatt hours, the number of hours you're running the light, it's not that expensive. So things to consider, all right? I'm going to set mine up so that it is based on our schedule here and based on when we leave, the lights going off and all of that. And then the other thing I think about is there a time change coming that will affect this? I encourage you to think that. A lot of times you'll set up your schedule perfect, and then a month later the time changes and you're like, ah, dang it, I don't want to change my timers, so now my whole schedule is an hour different than I anticipated. And you can change your timers to match, but it's a little weird in the middle of flower, like staggering it. I don't like doing it. So in any case, I'm gonna set mine to start at 6 a.m., okay? And I'm gonna have it end at 6 p.m. We close at 5:30, so by the time the guys close up, turn off the lights, 30 minutes later, the whole grow shuts down, and that's perfect. What I don't like to have happen is I don't want my flowering time to end too early, because we risk being open and someone wanting to look inside the tent and opening it, and that could be a problem. So 6 to 6 is what I'm going with, 7 days a week. And so on here, I can just schedule every day, which I've done, and I leave the checkbox, I leave the continuous unchecked. And then it automatically says my on-off duration is 12 hours on, 12 hours off based on that. Sunrise, sunset. This is a function on the AC Infinity where it's gonna slowly turn on the light and slowly turn off the light. It's totally up to you. I think that it's fine to just go hard in, right? Some people think it saves a little bit of energy. Some people think it mimics nature a little bit better. Inside the plant, there is a phytochrome switch. Whether you go slow or fast, when it's triggered, it's flipped in the plant. So I do believe that it's not of paramount importance. However, since you got the function, you can set it up. You can do 1 minute, 20 minutes, whatever you want. It's totally up to you to mimic that sunrise, sunset. I'm going to leave it off on both sides, and then min-max level, I want it to go to 0 so that when lights are off, it's down to 0. And then I'm gonna max level at 10 when they're on. However, I actually need to go off PPFD. Level 10, when the plants are pretty big, might be too much. And so I've got my guide, the one that I mentioned. And so what I'd like to do is set it according to this. And so less is more, in my opinion. And so for bloom, the first 4 weeks during the stretch phase, really the first 2 weeks, but the first weeks 1 through 4, I want to be going from about 700 ppfd up to about 1,000 at the max. I like to max out around 900, totally up to you. Less is more, especially when you're going for resin. And so 700 to 900 is kind of the range. I'm going to start off on the low end and then ramp it up. I usually like to set the ppfd the first day of flower, so tomorrow. That way they don't get blasted, because when you go into flower, you can crank up the light because you're cutting down the time. When your time goes down, more light doesn't really equal more light because your hours of light went down. That number that we talk about is called DLI, Daily Lighting Integral, and it's on here on the map. We're looking for a 40 to 44 DLI. And so if I put it at 700 ppfd for 12 hours, that number is gonna be 40 DLI. And so right now in veg, to hit 40, that could be 700 par. Sorry, that could be as much as 550 par, right, for 16 hours. So it kind of depends. You can do the math. I'm kind of talking around in a circle, but the numbers are here. So let's look at that. I'm gonna set it, my max on flower, I'm gonna set the max at 60%. Then I'm gonna measure the ppfd and then just see how that, and I'll adjust it, all right? And I encourage you to do the same. You wanna use your light meter that you got with your grow tent kit. If you didn't get a kit, you can get the light ray meter from us. It attaches to your phone, or you can get like an apogee meter, which I have right here I'm gonna use. 12 hours on, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., done, okay? Now next what I need to do is I need my exhaust fan. And so typically what I do is, like right now I've got my exhaust fan to be cycling 5 minutes for every hour, and that seems to be efficient enough to bring new air in and new CO2 in, and we talked about that. So I'm gonna go to my fan, which is the top one on here, and go to what it's set on. It's on continuous 24 hours a day. That's just the automatic when I selected flowering. I do not want that. So actually I'm gonna leave it on continuous. Yes, I do. And then I'm gonna go to the on time duration, and I'm gonna change that to 5 minutes, okay? We could talk about this, but in the episode on environmental setup, I discuss it. If you set it, your fan to be a temperature trigger and it never gets too hot, you're never bringing fresh air in. So I prefer to set it to a cycle as long as temperatures are under control. And then I cycle it every hour, so we bring fresh air in, that brings fresh CO2, and it's very important. So my off time, on time 5 minutes, my off time 1 hour off. That means every 1 hour, it's gonna turn on for 5 minutes, then off for an hour, then on for 5 minutes, then off. And then I wanna set my minimum level to 0 so that my fan's off when it's off. And I wanna set it to max 60%. It's a 6-inch fan on a 4x4 tent. It's plenty of power at 60%. And then of course we've got the green poles holding the sides from sucking in. That makes a big difference. And I'm gonna hit done. So now I've got my fan set for 5 minutes on, off for an hour. I've got 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for my 12 hours of lights on. And then what I wanna do is set my targets for humidity. Right now I've got it continuously targeting, and that is on 24 hours a day, targeting 1.4. That's just what it loaded onto my screen before I adjusted it. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of continuously target that, I wanna target my VPD while the lights are on and differently when the lights are off. And so I'm gonna turn that off. I'm gonna match the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Let me do that. So now what I'm scheduling is what I want my humidity to do while the lights are on from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 7 days a week. I'm gonna do a target. I'm gonna go right here on, and I'm gonna look, bloom, target, VPD day 1.2. I'm going to go to 1.2 kPa on here. As the target, I'm gonna go down to the min max. I'm gonna say up to 10 on humidity, but 0 when it's off. I don't want it on all the time, and I want it to go to max humidity when it turns on. And I'm gonna set a buffer of 0.1 kPa. I'll do 0.2, that's probably good. Actually, let's do 0.1, let's leave it. So now it won't turn right on and off. It'll go to 1.2 and then turn off, but when it gets to 1.1, then it'll kick back on. which is pretty tight, but I want it to keep the humidity tight. You can adjust it however you want, and I'm gonna hit done. To keep up with that on these tents with this little tiny humidifier, we've actually got a bucket over here that we fill, and I've got an auto top off that fills up the humidifier, and we're gonna be offering those kits. So if you're like worn out from filling up your humidifier all the time during veg and the beginning of flower, you might wanna check off that auto top off. It's pretty cool. All right, so now I've got that done. Let's take a look. 1.2 kPa, so it's targeting the VPD. You can use a trigger of a percentage of humidity or a target. Like let's say the target temperature on here, it says everything, is 80 degrees and 65% humidity. But instead what happens is, let's say it's 75 degrees. Well, the humidity can adjust if we target the 1.2 instead of just targeting a set humidity, and that's kind of cool. So I've got it targeted 1.2 during the day. All right, now let me go to, it's got a heater on here. I'm gonna delete it. I'm not using a heater. It's got a continuous target, something else. I'm just gonna delete. It's got an air conditioning I'm gonna delete. So now all I have in here are the 3 modes that I set. I'm gonna go, now this is confusing. You don't wanna hit the blue plus. You wanna hit the plus at the bottom because this will add it to my flowering recipe. And then what I'm gonna do is I need to set up the exhaust, the humidity and the exhaust really for when the lights are off. And so let's go to humidity right now and let's do, I could do VPD. At night it's about the same, but I really want a cooler temperature. So if I happen to have a warmer temperature, I don't need it to be humid at night. It's kind of a waste just because the plants aren't growing. They don't really need VPD at night. So I'm just gonna go to auto mode. I'm gonna select humidifier next, and I'm gonna go from 6 p.m. now. So this is once the lights go out, and then to 6 a.m. And you can do that, right? Starts at night, ends in the morning. It's still that 12-hour period, and 7 days a week. And I'm gonna have it target a humidity of 40%. That's plenty where it's not like too dry and it's not excessively wet. So I think that's good. I'm just gonna target 40%. Humidity can turn on from 0 to 10. I'm gonna do a buffer of 2% humidity and click done. And so now it'll go to 40%, it'll drop to 38, then it'll kick back on again. And that's at night. And with that much plant, it may never kick on. It may be above 40 the whole time, but it'll trigger and target 40% based on humidity. So now what I need to do is set the fan. Really the fan can just continually go on day and night. So I don't need that to be a certain way during the day and a certain way at night. Now, what you could do is, let's say your tent at the light setting that you want gets to like 95 degrees and you want your fan to kick on, you can set a temperature trigger. It'll trigger pretty often if your light's on during the day, and then you can set a cycle for night. But those are the 2 ways that are most often used for triggering your exhaust fan. So now let me think about this. I've got the Grandmaster 4x4. I'm gonna copy this exactly for this side in a moment, but I've got the light set up to 1212. I've got the fan exhausting how I need it. I've got the humidity set for the day and the night. And then I'm gonna have the oscillating fans on the whole time, no matter what. I like to circulate the air. You know, you could set that up on here to the controller if you really wanted to. So that's it. I'm gonna turn this one on to flowering right now. Schedule overlap. The automation is already scheduled to run continuously every day in port 4. Please set a separate scheduled time frame. Oop, let me see what I'm doing. Okay, I just had to turn veg off. Just want to make sure that I'm teaching you right. So I was checking to see if I had any overlap here. Really, the veg was on, and so it couldn't run both at the same time. So now I just turned flowering on. And so everything's running how it should. Let's go look. It's at 0.64. And it's probably because I just adjusted the cycle. It's gonna exhaust for 5 minutes. And so what I wanna do is I wanna set up that one up right now so that they go on about the same time. So I'm gonna go mimic that right now, and then Dean can just edit this and we'll move on to the next step, okay? All the same, okay, done. So they're all in synced up right now. Everything's going pretty well. We got them both tucked under. All right, now notice how the tent walls are sucking in. But right here we have those high CFM poles, so it's holding really nicely. I feel like that's enough where I could probably reduce the fan down to like 40% instead of 60%. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So let's go to the fan, max 4. That'll ease the pulling on the tent and still cycle plenty of air, I think. I can always increase it to 10 minutes, but I'm gonna leave it on 5. Go to the cypress, go to the fan, Max 4, done. Okay, so now they're both matching. I think that's better. All right, we did it. That's everything that I wanted to show you. I know that may have been a bit much on camera because I don't have like the app on the screen here, but essentially we've got to set up 12 hours of light, and I need to adjust my humidity to be targeting the right VPD. And if you don't know that, we've got plenty of episodes. You can type in BuildASoil VPD right here on YouTube, and we'll have lots of information on it. On the environmental guide, when you print it out, there's actually some definitions there in case you forget, and it explains what they mean, and I think that's helpful. Pretty soon, you'll just know what these terms are, and you'll know what it means. There's a whole language here so that we can have healthy plants. And I gotta tell you, this is part of the difference maker. When I first started, this information was not as easy to get. And so you'd be really, like for instance, I cut a lot of corners because I just didn't know how important they were. And if I had a friend tell me, hey, you can't fucking do that, I would have had a lot better first run. And so our goal is to be that friend for you if you don't have one that can tell you, hey, you can cut corners here, you can't do it there. And so we've got a new checklist that we're gonna be offering. When you're starting a grow, it's like a checklist anywhere in the world to go through all the stuff that you may not have thought of and make sure you've considered it on your checklist, whether it be electrical safety or just products that you might have to be ready for. And I think that really does help. But what I've noticed, when you get these things dialed, that was hard to figure out before, now it's easy. Now, not only is it easy to get the info, we have it literally on a guide, and it's proven information, but then we have a controller that you can program to just keep the parameters. It makes it so much easier. So for instance, if you don't have that controller and you're watching this, you could do your best. And so when you're faced with multiple decisions and you're not sure what to do, the holistic decision-making principle says that we should focus on the weakest link. And so if you're exhausting the air and you've got no controller, and it's just, maybe you've got a high and low, and you've got it turned down low, but you notice that it's dry where you live and all the humidity keeps getting sucked out. Well, the weakest link to fix would be that. You don't want to have fluctuating humidity. Plants do better with just always low or always good. But you don't want to up and down every day. And so that's why the auto top off is really cool. It eliminates running out of water. But if you notice that you're running out of water, it's sucking every bit of air, you just can't get the humidity up, and you really want to experience that jungle to see how fast your plants can grow. One old school trick would be just to go buy a mechanical timer, plug your exhaust fan into it, lower the speed on your exhaust fan if you do. Otherwise, you can buy like an Inkbird or something off Amazon, just a basic humidity controller, or I'm sorry, speed controller. But then what you do is you just plug it into a timer. And then instead of using this AC Infinity, your timer, you can set for 15-minute increments. Some other ones for cheap do even like 5-minute increments, but a 15-minute on-off mechanical timer is great. You can have your fans come on for 15 minutes every hour, maybe every 2 hours. That'll keep a lot more humidity in there, but you'll still get the fresh air. So I encourage you, if you're stair-stepping into this and you don't have the controller, reach out to us, ask around. There's always some old school hack for how you can get closer to a dialed environment. But man, as far as weakest links, if you have, like, these controllers are so cheap nowadays, if you can get one, it's just game changing to have the humidity, temperature, everything dialed. It really, really does make a big difference. To me, it's like owning a greenhouse. If you don't have some way for the sides to roll up and the shutters to open automatically, it's a lot more dramatic outdoors, but you can ruin your whole crop in one day just by thinking it's gonna be raining and all of a sudden the sun's out and it's 120 degrees in your greenhouse. So a little less dramatic indoors, but the controller, I think, just as important. And we're now flipped to flower. Tomorrow's the first day, and I promise I'll be recording very soon to show you how quickly they jump and what we're gonna do. And in the next episode, I'm gonna go over our feeding schedule. Most of the time on a new grow with an earth box, we just top dress and water only, but I wanna discuss the possible options so you know what you're looking at if you really wanna use some of the products. And also we overgrew it, so that's gonna be important. I think I covered everything. That's really what I needed to do for this episode, is just get to flower. So we accomplished that. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, at this point, I'd just like to ask you, please go click the subscribe button. It makes a big difference. And we just passed 200,000 followers. I'm not sure when this video is gonna get released. We plan on having some fun with it. So for those of you that have followed along for the last 12 years, I just really appreciate it. Some of you have been there since day one. And for those of you that are just finding us on this journey, BuildASoil, you know, our main thing is we make really high quality potting soil, and we have an education system called the BuildASoil Way. You're watching some of it right now, so that you as a home grower can just get really good results, even on your first try. Even if you've got a full-time job and a family and you think it might be, you know, too busy for it. There's no excuses. These things work. You'll get great results, save money, get better quality. So thank you again for watching. I appreciate you. And until next time, I'll see you on the next BuildASoil episode.